Sweet. Looks like we're live. And that was a crazy game. That honestly, that was one of the best basketball games I had seen in a long time. Just from a basketball standpoint, um, obviously, I may have a slightly different opinion if the Clippers hit that last shot that Gobert blocked, and then it went into overtime, and the Clippers won in overtime. But the Jazz won. It was an awesome finish. I think there's a lot that we learned about the Jazz from this game. I have some I know it's early in the series. This is going to be, at least I predict, is going to be a fairly long series. My prediction is Jazz win in 6. But I think just from this game, there's a lot that I can learn from about the series and about the Jazz. So with that, I just want to cover stats real quick because I think there's a lot for us to talk about. Leave anything that you want to talk about, any takes you have, any predictions, any questions, anything you want to talk about, anything like that. Leave that in the chat, and I'll get to that pretty quick this time because I think we have a lot to talk about, and the stats really don't tell the full story this time. I feel like most of the time they do. Tonight is not one of those occasions. But yeah, so the Jazz, obviously, they got off to a rocky start. Honestly, and we can get into this more, most of their shots were good. They definitely took some bad shots. In that first quarter, I saw some nerves. That I feel like there's being nervous impacts different players in different ways. And one way is players, if you're nervous as a player, sometimes you just won't take the shot if it's open. Sometimes you'll be kind of pass happy. I wasn't seeing that from really any of the Jazz players. They did pass up some open shots later in the game, but I think that's kind of part of their process, and that's what won them the game. In the beginning, though, what I was seeing is they would take the shot as soon as they were open, they would take it, but they were a little hesitant. So it's instead of getting squared up all the way and looking at the rim before jumping, they would just catch the ball, jump, and then they'd realize that they weren't kind of squared up, so they'd either force something or release it early. And I think that's why we were missing a lot of shots. And as a team, just if you miss too many shots in a row, it just it feels like there's a lid on the basket. And they kept forcing threes when in the first quarter, after they missed 5 shots in a row, they should have started trying to force it inside, kind of break that lid on the basket, and then start shooting threes again. But it worked out in the end. But that's my take on what happened in the first quarter. Oh, also, for everyone else here, Nate, he was at the game. If anyone else was here, awesome, let us know what you saw. But he probably has some different perspectives than what we saw on TV, and vice versa. So make sure to look out for his comments because I'm sure he has plenty of takes. But so with that awful shooting in the first quarter, that's why the Jazz only shot 40% from the field for the entire game, and 34% from 3. But the Jazz did something that's not characteristic of the Jazz, and they actually turned the ball over only 7 times. In this season, we were seeing it the Jazz were normally turning the ball over 13, 15 plus times. And they were really careful with the ball. Obviously, they had a couple of dumb turnovers, like that one right at the end where Mitchell threw it away. I'm sure there was a miscommunication, but even with the miscommunication, there was a bad pass. But stuff like that, but they still turned the ball over only 7 times, which is really what got them back into it. And if they kept turning the ball over like they normally do, they wouldn't have won this game. So I'm really excited to see that the Jazz can tighten it up when they need to win these kind of games. Now let's talk about some others. I'm going to there's one player I want to talk about on the Clippers really quick, and that's Zubats. I knew Zubats was a good center. Kind of the story around him has been he's not really that great, or he's just. I know I was a fan of Zubats when he was in the Lakers, and I thought he was a good pickup by the Clippers because they gave up almost nothing for him in that trade. I don't know, a year or so ago, and people weren't expecting him to even play many minutes tonight. but he almost made the Jazz lose this game. He was all over the rebounds. He was forcing Gobert to foul, which almost like Gobert almost fouled out tonight. He was blocking shots. Like we weren't getting the shots inside that we normally could have gotten when he was in the game. His stats, let me see if I can find him. His stats weren't incredible. Like he had 11 points and 6 rebounds, 3 assists and 3 blocks. So it's not like, but like his presence was definitely felt, especially with those 3 blocks. So that's something that we'll need to watch out for. If he can, he's probably going to be playing a lot more minutes after that performance. And then I'm guessing Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are going to have better games than what they had this game. So that's something to look out for. And forgot to mute my computer, and there's ads. Okay. But for the Jazz, number one thing, and I'm pretty sure I saw this in the comments, so we'll probably talk about it later, but the Jazz really, really missed Conley. Obviously, they got it together. They had an awesome comeback. They killed it. But in that first half, like as much as I love Ingles and as good, like it's not like he played incredible tonight. How much did he had 8 points, 7 assists, 3 boards, and only 1 turnover. So he didn't play awful. He didn't play incredible either. And I love having Ingles out there. I think he's a good defender. I think he's great to have out there to stretch the floor. And he can get assists, but he's nowhere near anywhere near the passer that Conley is. He just doesn't have that same point guard facilitator IQ that Conley has. And we really missed that tonight. That was obvious on some plays. And I'm hoping Conley comes back next game because that will be a huge boost for our offense. But that was really apparent that there were just times where our offense, especially in the first half, where our offense just wasn't clicking and there was no one there to run it. And Mitchell wasn't on the floor. So all we had was just Clarkson ISO. And that works out sometimes and that doesn't work out sometimes. I also want to shout out before I talk about how big of a deal Donovan Mitchell is to the Jazz and to the NBA. I want to call it bogey. His stats didn't have if you just saw his stats and didn't really watch the whole game, he looks like he had a normal game. He had 18 points, 5 rebounds. He was a plus 12, which is the highest plus minus of the Jazz. And what I was noticing is he was on Kawhi Leonard almost the entire night, which I kind of expected the Jazz to play O'Neal on Leonard just because O'Neal's our best perimeter defender. But he held Leonard to 23 points. And I don't know the breakdown of how many of those points he scored when Bogey wasn't guarding him, because there's definitely a lot of those. But Bogey did a really, really good job at guarding Leonard. He held his own. He did not make it easy on Leonard tonight. So I really wanted to shout that out. I was not expecting to see that, but that was an awesome surprise. And seeing play like that from Bogey, and on defense, which I've thought of him as a defensive liability, but seeing him play like that on defense really boosted my faith in the Jazz that there could be a championship run in our future. So that's exciting. Now let's hop over to Mitchell. I know there's going to be tons of comments in the chat about Mitchell, so we'll probably talk about this a couple more times tonight. But Mitchell scored his number. He had 45 points, which is awesome. He went off at the beginning. He hit, which was awesome. I thought if he kept that going, then this would have been a blowout, and that would have been awesome. But the downside, I'll talk about a couple negatives before I get into how big of a deal Donovan Mitchell is. But Donovan Mitchell, I've been noticing he does this a little bit. I noticed it a little bit in the season, not as much, but he loves that heat check 3, where he hits a 3 or he makes 2 big plays in a row, and then he kind of takes a dumb 3 just to see if it goes in. And I hate when he does that because that's not part of the Jazz offense. It kind of ruins any momentum that we have going from those 2 previous plays. And he did that a lot this game. at the same and so I don't want to see that happen. Maybe that's just what we have to deal with Mitchell, and if that's one of the few negatives that I have to say about Mitchell's game, I can live with that as long as Mitchell keeps playing like he played tonight. But he came back in the second half. He really sparked the run, and he was incredible after that. That reminded me of Mitchell from the Nuggets series where when him and Murray were just going back, scoring back and forth, Mitchell could just score at will. And there are some times where he just pulled off some magic. Like Mitchell is insanely good. And on the broadcast tonight, they pulled up a graphic where it showed Utah Jazz players with the most 40-point playoff games. Karl Malone has 4, and that's after all those years that he played for the Jazz, all of those deep playoff runs. He had 4 40-point playoff games, and he was the leading scorer on the Jazz for I don't know if he was for every single one, but for almost every single one of those runs, he was the leading scorer on the Jazz. Donovan Mitchell already in his career has 4. So that's saying something about how good of a scorer Donovan Mitchell is. They pull up another graphic showing the highest point per game average of playoff games of the active players in the NBA. Donovan Mitchell was 3rd on that list, and the other 3, it was Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and I don't know, James Harden or Steph Curry or someone like that. So 3 players who are 100% Hall of Famers who have been around forever. So he's in good company. Obviously, he hasn't played nearly as many playoff games as those players, but he'll get there, and I doubt he'll take a dip. Oh, and one more thing before I hop into the chat that I wanted to bring up. I've kind of given Derek Favors some flack for not really being because before the season, Nate and I would kind of hyped him up and how big of a deal this was, and we knew he wasn't going to come in and have huge stats, but I kind of expected him this season to do a little bit more on the box score than he has. But this game, out of the games that I watched, he really came and he made big plays. He had what I thought was going to be the block of the night until that last block that Gobert had. That was a huge momentum shift. He played great defense. After he kind of got in the rhythm of the game, he started matching up really, really well with Zubats. So I love Derek Favors' effort. And if we didn't have Rudy Gobert, who also played great just with a lot of fouls, and if Favors wasn't in foul trouble, we probably would have seen more of him. And I think the only obviously he's not as good of a defender as Gobert, but the main downside when Favors, because you don't expect your backups to be as good as your starters, obviously, but one thing that Favors lacks is he's just not as tall and long as Gobert, which obviously hurts his defense, but it also hurts his offense because he can't just dunk on people as easily. So that's why we're not seeing him score as much. But I just want to shout out Favors. He's probably especially tonight when there's so many Jazz players to talk about. I think he's one that can easily be missed for how good of an effort he put out there, and he really just held down the fort when the Jazz weren't performing as well. Especially with one thing to think about in this series is the Clippers are one of the few teams in the NBA who are just as deep, if not deeper, than the Jazz. So most of the time we're used to when our backups are in, we have an advantage. In this series, that's not going to be the case. When our backups are in, we're probably going to be having a disadvantage. And so having Favors being able to hold down the fort like that is going to be huge. Okay. I want to hop into the chat right now, but one thing, here's my hot take, and I'll also share my prediction, which I shared at the very beginning, but most of you probably weren't here. And I don't know if this is a hot take for you guys. You guys probably agree with me. But so my prediction is I think the Jazz will win the series in 6. That was my prediction when I made my bracket. And after watching tonight, I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm not going to alter anything there. So I think Jazz win in 6. Um, and the other thing, and tell me if this is too soon to make this prediction, just after the first game of the series. But I think from what I saw tonight, that the Jazz are clearly a better team than the Clippers. Maybe they don't have quite as much talent, but as far as how they play and what their scheme is and all, how all that goes, I think the Jazz are clearly a better team. But obviously, the Clippers are a tough enough opponent. They have a deep bench, and they have enough talent that they're going to take a couple games from the Jazz. But seeing how they fought and how the Clippers were fighting, but like I don't know, like I think the only reason why it came to that close at the end is because the Jazz bailed them out with a couple bad plays. And to the Jazz's credit, the Jazz weren't bailing them out with turnovers all night long like they usually do. So, and this is the Jazz without Conley, who was that's a huge takeaway. So if Conley can come back next game or the game after that, I don't think the Clippers really have much of a chance to win the series. I'm sure they're going to take a couple, even with Jazz at full strength. But yeah, that's my take. Let me know if that's too soon, if that's a little bit too extreme, or if you 100% agree. I'm guessing we'll have a little bit of a mixed reaction in the comments. Okay, I'll hop into the chat now. So the first thing I'm seeing, DPOY, that Gobert needs that Defensive Player of the Year, which honestly, like, Gobert played great on defense and he had that block, but I feel like this was like a mediocre to subpar defensive performance from Gobert when you compare it to his other games overall as a whole. Which, that being said, that kind of shows how good Gobert actually is on defense. That this kind of performance in this high pressure of a situation and with a game-saving block is like a subpar performance. But that shows, like, if that's a subpar performance, Gobert is 100% the Defensive Player of the Year, especially when you look at the Sixers and Ben Simmons having the toughest time doing anything to slow down Trae Young even a little bit. Who's the other candidate really for the Defensive Player of the Year? Okay, so Liberty Return says we need Conley. Our offense wasn't dynamic at all. That's true. Like, we're so lucky that we have Donovan Mitchell, which obviously we wouldn't be here without Donovan Mitchell. But if it weren't for Donovan Mitchell and how he can just kickstart an offense, we wouldn't be anywhere near winning this game. This would have been a blowout for the Clippers, just because, like, when Donovan Mitchell plays like that, it makes making plays for everyone else really, really easy, because there's so much defense concentrated on Mitchell that you don't have to make tough passes because there's always going to be someone open, and it's getting assists is a lot easier when Donovan Mitchell plays like that. When Conley's back, he'll be able to make the tough passes. He'll be able to really play off of that Gobert pick and roll and lob to Gobert, because there are times tonight where I saw that Gobert was in the perfect dunker spot, that if he just took a step up and the ball handler was looking, he would have had the alley-oop. But it was a tough enough pass that the only person I trusted to make that pass was really Mitchell. And so having Conley will make the offense like a lot tougher to read. And even if Mitchell doesn't go off for 45, it's like it'll keep the Clippers guessing, and it'll make it tough for the Clippers defense, where the Clippers defense, except for Mitchell, they played really good. It's just Mitchell was unstoppable tonight. Okay, so Jazz missed 21 straight shots and won the game. Absolutely incredible. Like, wasn't the last time something like that happened in the playoffs was like when the Rockets played the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, where they missed however many threes in a row. So this is a really, really special game, especially since we haven't had many opportunities to see the Jazz come from behind and have a comeback like this in the season, because obviously they were that much better than most every single team that they played. They did have a couple comebacks this year, but nothing like this, and nothing against a team like the Clippers, who were playing like the Clippers tonight. So that was incredible. And I think it shows that the Jazz weren't like, they had bad possessions, but they weren't playing bad basketball in the first quarter. It's just the shots weren't falling. Um, and I think Quinn Snyder, like if I was Quinn Snyder, I would have told them to go in the paint, but I don't like he didn't. I think he was telling them to keep shooting threes. Um, and I think that's incredible because like there's a lot there's a lot on the line in this game. Um, this game is where you have all of the advantage, and if you lose it, you lose a lot of the advantage in the entire series. Um, and Coach Snyder, like he had so much faith in the team and the team's shooting that he was telling them to keep shooting even when they missed 21 shots in a row. Um, he didn't like say, "Okay, this isn't working. Let's redraw the whole offense." He said, "No, this is the offense. This is what we're good at. Let's keep doing this. This is what we're going to do." So, I think that's awesome from the coaching staff. I think that's awesome from the players that they stayed in it. They didn't give up. They played with heart the whole time. So, um, I think this is one of the this will probably be a game that most Jazz fans will remember for a while, unless the Jazz go and win the championship this year. Then this one will just kind of be a footnote in this whole season. Um, cool. So Nate said Donovan was elite in the second half and hustle was unreal, and Nate also said he didn't have a voice from all the yelling. That's for there are times during the broadcast that I couldn't hear because the broadcasters were actually in the building this time, which in past games they were broadcasting remotely, but they were actually in the building, and there were times where I couldn't hear the broadcasters on TV because it was so loud and Vivint. I love that. I love the energy that the fans brought, and I think that gives the Jazz a clear advantage, especially when looking at LA. And they're at like, I don't know what the percentage capacity is, but it's nothing compared to Vivint. Carter says, can Shaq just call Mitchell a superstar already? Like he better. Here pretty soon, Mitchell's going to start breaking some like of Shaq's playoff records. I don't know if he holds any actual records, but I bet Mitchell's coming after Shaq's like number 40-point games in the playoffs and number 30-point games in the playoffs. Obviously, Shaq had a long career with a lot of playoff games, so that might take a while, but I'm sure he's well on his way with this great start that he's been having. So Shaq wants Jazz in the finals first before Shaq calls Spider a superstar. Lol. Yeah, and if the Jazz win the finals, Shaq's going to claim most of the credit because he'll say that he called Donovan not a superstar, and that's what motivated him, and that's what Donovan was thinking about the whole time. And plus Shaq's buddy Dwayne Wade was helping Donovan Mitchell out tonight, so that goes on Shaq too, right? So I don't think Shaq will. I think after the media storm last time, I think he's going to slow down on that stuff. But I don't know. He's Shaq. He kind of does what he wants, and nothing's going to happen to him. So we'll see. Nate says, I think Gobert was 4 for 6 from the line in the fourth, which is pretty solid for him. Yeah, he was clutch. There's one point where he got 2 sets of free throws really close to each other. He was 3 for 4, which is exactly like if we can get that from Gobert, if he can shoot like right around like that 4 for 6 mark in the fourth quarter, or like the 3 for 4 mark in the fourth quarter, that's awesome. And that's clutch for Gobert. Matthew KB says, I love the game. It was exciting. The Jazz came out slow, but got the job done. And it was just such a good game. as a Jazz fan, I'm sure Clippers fans feel a different way, but I don't know. Um, uh, I think basketball fans, at least, whether like even if they're not fans for either of these teams, like at least they got a good game out of this. Like I loved it at least though. I'm rambling, but that reminded me. I'm sure all of you have heard, but we've been talking about like that small market and like teams that haven't won as much. And this is a really exciting playoffs because everyone in the second round, like like every team in the second round right now hasn't won a championship since, was it 1983? And that was the Sixers in 1983 was the last time they won a championship. So, and I think the next year is when they expanded to the 16 team playoffs. So this is kind of cool, kind of a historic playoffs. And there's a very, very high chance that we're going to see a franchise win a championship that has never won a championship before, especially since the favorite going into this is the Nets. But and after watching the 2 games against the Bucks, I can't see the Nets losing until maybe the finals. Maybe the Jazz pull off a Cinderella upset by the Jazz making it. That would be awesome. So Carter says it was a good win. Let's hope Conley makes an appearance in this series. I know. I don't know. Like they said Miles, so unless the Jazz sweep, I would be shocked if Conley doesn't come back, but I don't know what the expectations are. I'm really hoping to see him in game 2. Maybe that's a little bit of a hopeful thinking, especially with how the Jazz managed Mitchell's injury right at the beginning of the playoffs. And after a win, maybe they have more motivation to sit him in that case. I don't know. I really hope he comes back soon because it might be tough to pull this off every night without him. Nate says the heart that the Jazz showed gives me so much more belief in this team. Yeah, like, yeah. I'm not going to add to it. I just agree that I felt the same thing watching this. I knew the Jazz were a good team, and I knew that they totally could make it to the finals and win. But watching this game, I agree with Nate. Like, I have so much more trust in that because going into this game, like before the tip, do any of you guys get like really nervous when it's a big game and you're watching your team play? Like that's what I was feeling for the whole like first quarter, and they did not like help that feeling for me at all in the first quarter. But luckily, that third quarter was incredible and they tied things up and then pulled out the win. Carter said Mitchell scored 45 points. Kawhi and Paul George together scored 43 points. That's awesome. I love that. That should be a t-shirt. Nate said Paul George could not hit a 3 tonight. Yeah, how many did he hit? He was 3 for 8, so like the weird thing is like I saw the same thing Nate saw. Like Paul George was having a tough time hitting threes, but he was 3 for 8, which isn't that bad. I can remember 2 threes he hit, but I could have like maybe some of those threes his toe was on the line that he missed, so maybe it counted as a 2, but so I don't know, but I thought he took more threes than 8. So Donovan had Reggie Jackson literal tears after fouling him out and dropped 45 for his godfather D Griffith. 45, let's go. Take note, pray for Pandemic P. He's still stuck in the bubble. I love that comment. Yeah, that's a good point, like with the 45 and his number 45. I think that's a story. I don't know if every Jazz fan knows that, but I don't know. I remember I don't know. I was reading into that recently, but I don't have all the details, so I won't share into that. But go look that up. Why Donovan wears 45 if you don't know. Yeah, and that point where Reggie Jackson fouled out, like it was kind of going back and forth. I felt like the Jazz were going to win when Reggie Jackson fouled out, even though it's not like he was the biggest impact. He only had 9 points, but he's definitely like kind of like Patrick Beverley, where he comes out and he's like an energy guy. And when he fouled out and just kind of like how he reacted, I feel like that kind of hurt the whole morale of the Clippers. And at that point, even though I knew there was a chance the Clippers came back, I kind of had that I like could exhale because I could kind of tell that the Jazz were just going to hold on to this unless they really messed it up, which they got close to messing up. And we played great defense at the end, so great for us, great for the Jazz. Nick Reeder says Kawhi can't stop the spider, and he probably can't, honestly, because I don't know. I swear, like watching Donovan Mitchell, sometimes it feels like he can just teleport. He just like dribbles, he's in between three guys, and all of a sudden he's wide open with a layup. I don't know how he does it. It's incredible. But Donovan Mitchell also, because especially towards the end when Donovan Mitchell was really heating up, they were trying to make sure Kawhi could stay on him. Sorry. But the Jazz were really setting up the offense so that they would force a switch on the defense. And the Clippers were leaving Luke Kennard out there a long time, which they probably shouldn't have. They probably, because Paul George wasn't out there, and Paul George hasn't been playing great, but he's a way better defender than Luke Kennard. But the Jazz kept forcing the switch so that Luke Kennard had to guard Mitchell, and then Mitchell could just like walk to the basket and get an easy 2 or get fouled. So love that strategy, but I'm expecting, like, if the Clippers keep letting that happen, the series is over. So I'm expecting they go to the drawing board and figure out a way to keep Kawhi on Mitchell. And then if Mitchell still comes out and scores 30 plus, it's game over for the Clippers. Because if their best defender can't slow down Donovan Mitchell, and with how much of a force Donovan Mitchell is on offense and how much he opens up the offensive scheme, it's just like Donovan Mitchell, like Luka, as great as he is at passing, I feel like if Luka goes off, you can let Luka try to beat you and you can still win games. As good as Luka is and all of that, if Luka had the right pieces around him, it might be different. But Donovan, he has the right pieces around him, and he's the kind of player where you have to suck so much defense onto him that he has so many shooters around him or Gobert's going to be open in the dunker spot, that people are going to be open. I feel like I've talked through this like too many times, so you guys are probably bored of hearing me talk about it. But and so like sometimes people say, "Oh, just let the superstar beat you as long as you shut everyone else down." Like people tried that strategy with James Harden. I don't think that method will work with Donovan and the Jazz, because Donovan's a good enough passer, and I don't want to say because James Harden's a great passer and Luke is a great passer, but Donovan's a good enough passer, and he has the right teammates around him that's never like, and he's good enough that if you just let him score, he could make that happen, and he'll score every single possession if you let him. So you have to commit that extra effort. And so I think the Jazz really have a great system and a great roster, which is why they've played so great. They have the best record in the NBA. Oh no, it skipped me to the bottom. I need to find my spot again. Sorry. Sometimes the chat just decides it wants to push you straight to the bottom, and so then I miss my spot, and I don't want to miss any of your comments. So I just got home from leaving the game live, and bruh, it was live for my suite. Nice. Fire. Okay. So Nate says Gobert showed why he is so special in that last play. The fact that he can recover that quickly is unreal. I know, because it definitely helps that his wingspan is forever infinite. But like he jumped. He took the bait of the pump fake, which honestly isn't a bad thing. There was like 1.2 seconds left on the clock. So it's like, it's incredible that, was it Morris who took that shot? That Morris even had time to like re-square up and shoot. But then he took the bait and jumped, was able to land and jump again and block that shot. So that's like, people are going to say that's just because of length, but that's also like I don't know. Gobert has a different kind of athleticism. He's not I don't know, but that's a good point, Nate. Um, Nick Reeder says the Jazz weren't on with their shots tonight either. They kind of were at some points. Like there were times where they were on rhythm, and then they were playing like we expect them to, where they missed some shots, but the really good shots fell in almost every time when they had that momentum. And in the first half, it wasn't there, definitely. And there were some stretches in the second half where it's just like threes weren't dropping for a little bit. And it says they were 5 for 20 in the first quarter, 12 for 30 for the rest of the game. Dang. Took a lot of threes in that first quarter. If they get back into the normal percentage, they'll be dominant. Yeah, because the normal, like, I think on the last series against the Grizzlies, as a team, they shot 40%. The Clippers are a better defensive team. Even though the Grizzlies did a pretty good job at defending the Jazz most games. But like, if that drops down to 38%, what were they tonight? Like 30%. So that's 4 more threes, and that's a pretty big margin. They're 34%, so that 2 more threes, but still that's 6 extra points in a 3-point game. That's a big difference. The Jazz won't have okay. The Jazz won't have that bad of a first half for the rest of the playoffs. Let's hope not. Never say never, right? But I don't think so. Like, unless we sweep the Clippers and we have to wait forever for another series or something like that. I think that's a chance, but I don't think we're going to be in that situation because all the other series are in like game 2 heading into game 3 soon, and we just got done with game 1. So we're already a little bit behind. So I don't like, I think like full capacity, the energy that was there, the players were a little nervous. They had rested for almost a week. I think all that kind of played into the bad first half. But I agree, it probably won't happen, but never say never. Don't jinx it. It says, I'll be interested to see what happens if they keep getting so much rest between series. Yeah, maybe they'll figure it out from this one. But honestly, I don't think they're going to see that much rest between series anymore because, like I mentioned, they are behind. And that is only like a game and a half behind, I guess you could call it that. Because some series are playing their game 3, I think, tomorrow. So, yeah, I think we'll be the ones coming in with momentum unless we just finish the series up really quick. So much trash talk from Clippers fans too. Everyone wants LA to be in finals and thinks the Jazz would be boring. Hope we smoke them. Yeah, I like Kawhi Leonard. I liked Paul George. Obviously, hasn't been performing great, so it's not like a ton to root for there on the court. But I just don't like this. I don't like how like the whole Clippers attitude. I feel like I feel like they're trying to take on, like, they're the bad guy, like taking on the villain role, like the late 80s, early 90s, like Bad Boy Pistons. But they're not playing like the Bad Boy Pistons. And I feel like they're almost like they're like the whiny villain. That's kind of because I feel like, I don't know, because everyone complains, but I feel like their complaining is a little bit more annoying, and like how they play, they tank to avoid the Lakers, and like that's just like that's not the same mentality as like the Bad Boy Pistons, who would just, they'll take on any challenge and they're confident that they'll win. So I don't know. I don't like the whole mentality, even though I do like some of the players on the team. And I was listening to, I think it was The Jump with, I think, I don't remember. It was like, I had a meeting this morning, and then I was like rushing to get ready so I wouldn't be late for work because I had a meeting before work. And so I was like listening to that while I was like making my breakfast. So I didn't get everything, but what was he saying? Oh yeah, and they were talking about how with these teams in the playoffs, and there's been so many that haven't won a championship before. Like, is this the future of the NBA? And they're talking about like, is this good for the NBA as a whole? And they're saying, oh, and I think Rachel Nichols said something like that it's probably good for overall fan interest in the long run, but maybe not so much for revenue. And then they had this whole discussion about like how is a small market team actually better for revenue and in the long run and things. So I think that they brought up some interesting points, and they weren't just saying, hey, big markets are best for the NBA. They were saying like having a decent mix might be better in the long run, even though it might not pay out as much this year. So I don't know. I don't know enough about how NBA revenue works, and I don't know those numbers, but I hope I hope we get two small market teams in the finals, and I hope it brings up those conversations, so that brings more of those numbers to light, so we can hear that talked about. So I almost hope the series goes at least 6, so the Jazz don't rest. I know that's an interesting balance. It depends on how fast Conley comes back and if he's 100% healthy. But at the same time, like, I do hope it goes longer, because I feel like this series will be really good basketball no matter what. At the same time, though, if the Jazz sweep the Clippers, that just kind of shows how dominant the Jazz are. I don't think they will. The Clippers are a good team, and I think we're going to have a lot of battles like we had tonight. Okay, so Nate says, I'll be interested to see when Mike comes back. Typically, he'd take 2 weeks off with his hamstring tweaks. Let's hope he doesn't take 2 weeks off. I bet we could still beat the Clippers without him, but it's a lot tougher. It would be a lot tougher to win without Conley. We need Conley back. Can't wait to watch the replay game on NBA TV. I know this is one that's good enough. Like, most of the time I get bored watching a game over again. I'm just looking at like specific plays or just like trying to break down certain things. I think this is an entertaining enough game that I would watch it over again. I was at the home game tonight, and even from my suite, the arena was literally rocking from the vibration of the crowd. That's awesome. I love that energy, and the Jazz need that energy. Yeah, that's what I'll say there. Cool. Shaq better wash Mitchell's feet if the Jazz win the finals. I don't know what to respond to that, but I think that's funny. Nate says, it was so loud tonight, I'm still lightheaded from the shouting. And Nate, you'll need to take tomorrow off for work or something after that. And that was a good game to choose to go to in person, even though you're probably going to have some hearing loss from it. 7 turnovers for the Jazz was clutch. Yeah, I covered about half the game, so I haven't looked at all the team stats for the Jazz this season. But from the games I covered, I saw 1 or 2 games that was less than 10 turnovers. So even with the bad shooting, Jazz taking care of the ball like that is huge, because the Jazz have not been doing that all season long. And against a team who, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would imagine, since they're good defenders, that they're really good at causing turnovers. So that's if we can see that from the Jazz the rest of the playoffs, that they're going to be a tough team to beat, especially as their shots start falling. Okay. Oh no, it jumped. Okay. Mitchell's throwing out of bounds with 40 seconds left. Yeah, even when I'm in person games, I don't know how I'd react if I was here, but I'm typically like, I like to watch the basketball play out. I don't say much. If I say anything, it'll be like, oh, like, you need to swing the ball, or it'll like, I don't know. I'm like a coach who sits on the top row of the bleachers and no one can hear me. So that's how I talk at basketball games most of the time. But that Mitchell throwing the ball out of bounds right at the end, that got me to like stand up and freak out a little bit. I did not see what he was seeing And I think as soon as he threw the pass, he realized that he wasn't seeing what he was seeing either. So we got really lucky, and we shut them down the last place, and we came out with the win. Okay. And he says, yeah, and the Clippers offensive board to get up another 3 and make it one possession game. Like one thing, I don't want to downplay like the Clippers fight right at the end, because they had some clutch baskets. They they took advantage of some opportunities, and I don't know if this was like what this was definitely not what Nate was talking about, but it kind of got me thinking about this. Like after like and at the beginning or more towards the middle of this, like I was saying, like I'm pretty confident the Jazz are a much better team. Um, and so with all that, and like I don't want to underestimate the Clippers, even though I do think the Jazz are a better team, because the Clippers fought at the end, even though they weren't playing incredible all night long. They were down by 10 with, I don't know, like 2 minutes left or something like that. Cut it down, bring it to within 3. They had that alley oop to Zubats with like 1.5 seconds left on the shot clock. I don't remember when that was, but like they had these little moments that kept them in the game, and they fought hard. So I'm expecting to see that from the Clippers all night or all series, especially after they just went through a tough 7-game series, and they're probably ready to go through another tough 7-game series with the Jazz. So the Jazz can't let up, and I don't think the players have that mindset. So I think the players are good. We just need to expect a tough series with this one. Okay. I hope the scoring evens out for the rest of the Jazz team. As good as Mitchell is, he could use more scoring support. Luka couldn't carry the Mavs, just a thought. Yeah. Obviously, if Conley comes back, that will be a huge help. And I think if Conley comes back, Gobert will be a bigger part of the scoring. I don't think Zubats is going to have that kind of defensive night every game this series like he did tonight, because it was rough for Gobert to score, and it was rough to get the passes in to him, like when and where he needed it. Clarkson did okay. I'd like him to shoot more efficient, but he had some big baskets, all of them threes. But yeah, I would like to see a few more shots from Bogey, because he took 14. I would like to see him take more, and we just need Ingles to hit a few more shots, because he took some good threes and they just weren't falling. So yeah, if that happened, that would have been a lot nicer. And I think Mitchell could score like this and we could still win the series, just because I think the Jazz are built different than the Mavs. But yeah, I agree. It's not going to be easy, and I don't know if Mitchell that might burn Mitchell out by the time we get to the conference finals. Nate says, yeah, Bogey and Clarkson did both get 18, but Mitchell does need more help. Okay. Don't get me wrong, not comparing the Jazz to the Mavericks. Mavs don't come close to the Jazz, both defensively and offensively. And then, yeah. Yeah, the Mavs are kind of a weird built team. They have Luka, and they're built with imagining Kristaps being what he was, and he's really not been playing that way. And then obviously they made the trade. They traded Seth Curry, which was kind of stupid. But I won't get too much into how the Mavs roster is just like not really built well, and the Jazz roster is built amazing. But yeah, Tyler says, I was at the game. It was amazing. The atmosphere was amazing. I know, and like I feel like Utah fans have always been really good, especially in the playoffs. And then this being like we're finally back, like full Vivint Arena, a huge playoff game. I'm sure this was like one of the best games as far as fan fan environment and atmosphere in that arena. Cool. And yeah, so we've gone 50 minutes. I'm sure Nate kind of has a sore throat from yelling all game. I kind of have a sore throat from talking for 50 straight minutes. So I'll wrap it up here. thanks for tuning in, guys. That was an awesome game. Um, I don't know, like I've just been talking for 50 minutes. I don't know if I have much more to say about the game. I'm sure you've heard it all already. So thanks for tuning in. Like I'm excited for game two. Make sure you tune in for game two, especially if it's like, well, win or loss, tune in. I've noticed the win conversations are a lot more fun and they go on a lot longer than normal like this one. So make sure to tune in. If you're a Jazz fan, make sure if you're not subscribed, subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way, as soon as we go live, you get notified. You can hop on and join the chat from the very beginning, and that way you don't have to wait forever to get to your chat because I normally chat. I just talk at the camera for 5 or 10 minutes, and then by the time I get to the chats at the bottom, it's been 40 minutes. So the sooner you get on and the sooner you get your comments up, the faster I'll address them. So thanks for tuning in. Have a good night and go Jazz.